the Ottoman Empire was evil. All right, I'm not going to deny that. I mean, the Armenian genocide was pretty terrible. The reality is that the Ottoman Empire had a lot of Jews living in it. And the reality is that a lot of Jews fled into the Ottoman Empire from Spain. And the Ottoman Empire had every opportunity to exterminate its entire Jewish population. But it never did. It never did. And the Ottoman Empire only pursued a policy of complete extermination of various races when the Ottoman Empire went under the control of Darwinists. That was the only... The Ottoman Empire never went out of its way to exterminate a people until the Sultan was thrown out and the leadership was taken over by a bunch of atheist Darwinists. That speaks volumes. That is an attestament to the fact that this genocidal ideology of the modern era, this genocidal way of thinking of the modern era, really stems from the West's adoption of Darwinistic thinking, of Darwinian evolution. And it came from the West. It didn't come from the East. It came from England. It came from Germany. It came from France. It came from the Enlightenment, which came from France. It came from the Western world. Anything demonic leads to death, right? Anything demonic leads to murder or indifference to murder or the justification for murder, right? Anything from Satan, any idea from the devil will lead to death. There is a verse from the book of Proverbs that says, all those who hate me, God, love death. All those who hate me love death. All those who hate God love death. And so if you look at, for example, the history of Mormonism, Mormonism led to the Mountain Meadow Massacre, which was the massacre of hundreds of travelers who were trying to make it to California to get some gold in the gold rush. The Mormons murdered those people. Mormonism also led to the murder of other innocent people as well. The Mormons made Utah into a Mormon theocracy. It was supposed to be a utopia. The reality is that it was a dystopia, and that Mormons did murder people. They had the Danites, which was Joseph Smith's private army, and so he was killing people. Islam led to the deaths of a lot of people. Every satanic idea will eventually lead to death. It'll eventually lead to murder. It'll eventually lead to tyranny. It'll eventually lead to the enabling or the justification of murder or the justifying of murder. It will always lead people to find pretext to justify murder. So if you look at Darwinism has been used to justify genocide. It was used to justify genocide all throughout the 20th century. It was used to justify genocide during the Holocaust, during the Armenian genocide. It was used to justify genocide against the people of Namibia. It has been used to justify abortion. It has been used to justify euthanasia. It's been used to justify just horrific things, for horrific acts. Darwinism has been the most genocidal ideology in the history of the world. I don't think there's an ideology as genocidal as Darwin. And I know that the Zionists are going to come out and they're going to say, Islam. There's nowhere in Islam that says to annihilate a race. That doesn't exist. There's no verse in the Islamic religion that says annihilate an entire people. You just won't find it. In Darwinism, it teaches, Charles Darwin taught that for one race to annihilate another race is of the natural order, because the natural order is survival of the fittest. And so if my people annihilates your people, that is a demonstration of our supremacy over you, and it is a demonstration of your inferiority to us because we killed you. The proof is in the genocide. You know the saying, the proof is in the pudding? The proof is in the genocide. So according to Darwinism, the proof of the superiority of a race is in the fact that it can genocide others. That's what Darwin taught. Darwin taught this. He did. And I don't give a shit. You can say he's a product of his time. Bullshit. He was living in a predominantly Christian area. He was living in Europe. He was born and raised in Europe. Europe at this point had been Christian for over a millennia. And Christianity was the main influence over Europe. Christianity just doesn't teach genocide. So don't give me this bullshit. Oh, he was a product of his time. No, he wasn't. He was a product of the diabolical. And he was telling people, well, we came from bacteria. We evolved from apes and bacteria and all this stuff. And so because we are the result of natural selection, who is to say that we humans cannot become the natural selectors? And if I am misinterpreting Charles Darwin, then tell me, how in the hell did Francis Galton misinterpret his own uncle? Because Francis Galton, the nephew of Darwin, came up with the term eugenics because he was influenced by his uncle, Charles Darwin. We have this Darwinian way of thinking that is dominating the modern world. It's been dominating the modern world since the 20th century. And we have Israelis who are atheists, and they believe in the supremacy of the Jewish race. You have religious Jews who believe in the supremacy of the Jewish race, and they think it's okay to commit mass murder because some rabbi told them that it's okay, or because they think that, hey, there is no God, so who cares? There's no morals. You see the sickness of it all? You see this evil? There's no teaching in the... I know, Islam, bad, oh, the jizya, oh, Sharia law. I know, I'm not denying any of that. But the fact is that there's no teaching in Islam that says, kill this entire people. Kill all blacks. Kill all Greeks. Kill all Armenians. That doesn't exist in Islam. Now, there is an exception. Islam believes that there will eventually be an extermination of all Jews when the Mahdi comes, and all Christians when the Mahdi comes. So the genocidal nature of Islam is reserved for the Mahdi's coming. So eventually there's going to be a guy who's going to rise up, who's going to say, I am the Mahdi, and the Muslim world is going to follow him. That's when Muslims are going to become genocidal. But as far as a teaching in Islam that says you must be genocidal, that doesn't exist in Islam. It exists in Darwinism. And Darwinism didn't come from the East. It came from the Western world. It's a product of the super civilized Western civilization, Western civ. And that's what all these bullshit artists keep touting. Western civilization, for the defense of Western civilization. For the defense of Western civilization. Western civilization. And there was a time in the early 2000s, in the 2010s, when there was this... I remember those days. I was very active in those days. Not sexually active, no. Unfortunately for me, I was never sexually active. But I was very active in the world of reading and writing and just getting into that conservative circle. And there was this sort of renaissance that was going on in the early 2000s. I would say more so in the early 2010s. That was obsessed with Western civilization. And you had some big thinkers, people like Roger Scruton. Now, I loved Roger Scruton's documentary on art and aesthetics and what is beauty and the nature of beauty and why we human beings need beauty. It's a wonderful documentary. I recommend that everyone go see it. Maybe it's on YouTube, I don't know. But it was a beautiful documentary on beauty and art and aesthetics. But Roger Scruton was a part of that world. He was part of that renaissance that was going on in Western conservatism that rose up and spoke about the West and that spoke about Western civilization. And a lot of these people meant well, but some people did not mean well. You know, Roger Scruton was a good guy. I don't think he was an evil person, but there were people who truly were evil. You had people coming out talking about Western civilization. You had your Samuel Huntingtons and the like, who were coming out talking about the exception of Western civilization, Western exceptionalism and American exceptionalism. And Dennis Prager was pushing that sort of thing. And there was a guy, a Palestinian American academic by the name of Edward Said, and he was really writing against this way of thinking. And he said that there is this mentality that is being pushed in the Western world that wants us to fixate on Western civilization against the East. And I think that this was illustrated, or this was exemplified in the film 300 and the popularity for that movie. In the film 300, there is this very clear propaganda. I kind of noticed it when I was watching it in theater, and it's a very evil movie. I really hate that film, even though there are some nice lines in it, but I really hated that movie, and I hated it even when I saw it in theater. I hated it. And when I saw that film back in the early 2000s, I was still in high school. But at that time, I was reading a lot about Darwinism and Herbert Spencer and survival of the fittest. And I was also reading about ancient eugenics, eugenics in the Greek world specifically. And I was reading about how the Spartans had a ritual where they would take a child, a newborn baby, and they would place the newborn baby right outside of Sparta. And they would leave the baby there for several days, and they would come back. And if the baby was dead, then they would say, well, the baby was not strong enough to hold the name of Spartan. And if the baby was alive, they would say, this baby is strong enough to be a Spartan. And there was this evil eugenics that would actually directly influence Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler said that the ancient eugenics of the Spartans is something that we should actually model our society after. And so in that movie, there is a clear propaganda that is being conveyed. There is a clear propaganda that is being pushed. And that is this propaganda of Western civilization versus the East, the tyrannical East. In the film 300, you have the Greeks versus the Persians. And this war is being used as a way to push for this idea of Western civilization versus the East, and Western exceptionalism versus Eastern despotism. And the Persians were a people of despotism and dictatorship, and the Spartans were a people of civilization and civilization. And the film kind of defeats itself when it talks about the eugenic policy of the Spartans. I mean, how were the Spartans civilized if they were committing eugenics and if they were murdering their own newborns? There's nothing civilized about that. That's barbaric. But the film was trying to present the Spartans as these people who were on the bulwark, who were guarding Western civilization from the eastern hordes of Persia. But the film, it was trying to push this idea that the Spartans were this guard against the East, against Eastern tyranny. But when you look at history and when you look at even modern day society, you find that a lot of tyrannical ways of thinking actually came from the West. Darwinism didn't come from the East, it came from the West. And Darwinism was used to justify every single genocide, from what the Germans did to the Namibians, to what the Ottomans did to the Armenians, to what the Germans did to the Jews, and to other peoples who they deemed to be inferior. Atheism was the byproduct of Darwinism, and atheism became foundational for the Soviet Union. And atheism was something that was enforced by the Leninists in the Soviet Union, and that was a horrendous form of tyranny that led to massive persecution of Christians in the Soviet Union, and countless priests were murdered because they were priests, and churches were forced to be transformed into government offices, and people were tyrannized because they were Christian by the Leninists, because the Leninists believed that atheism was the supreme worldview, and that Christianity was this primitive way of thinking that needed to be purged out. But again, these were all byproducts of Western thinking. This didn't come from the East. So truly, who is civilized? Truly, who is innovative? Truly, who is a force of civility? If you want to sit there and say that the West is this exceptional force for civility, then you're going to have to try to explain away Darwinism. You're going to have to explain away the Darwinist influence on every single genocide that took place in the 20th century. You're going to have to explain away the Holocaust, which happened in the West. You're going to have to explain away the fact that the greatest genocide of the Jews in the history of the Jewish people was not done in the East. It was done in the West, and it was orchestrated by Westerners. You're going to have to explain away the fact that the biggest slaughter of the Polish people in the history of the Polish people wasn't done by Easterners. It wasn't done by Middle Eastern people. It wasn't done by Muslims. It was done by Germans. Where is the civility? Where is it? You have to try to explain away the fact that in a Western, modern, secular country like Iceland, there are virtually no people with Down syndrome, not because they have discovered a cure for Down syndrome, but because they have killed virtually all people with Down syndrome through partial birth abortion, or through just abortion or infanticide. Where is the civility? Where is it? And by the way, people will sit there and watch the film 300 and glorify the Spartans, but what they never care to look into is the fact that After the Peloponnesian War, the Spartans would actually ally with the Persians against the rest of the Greeks. So all this bullshit about the Spartans being this bulwark against the East and being this guard for the West and for Western civilization is complete fucking horseshit. To be honest with you, it's just complete horseshit that is utterly vacuous of any historical, uh, any historical reality. Uh, the Spartans didn't give a shit about any concept called the West. They didn't give a damn about this concept that we have called the West. This idea of the West is a very modern concept. The Spartans, I mean, they were killing other Greeks all the time. Go read about the Peloponnesian War. The Greeks were always killing each other, vying, not always, but for a long time they were killing each other, vying for power, vying over who was going to rule over the Mediterranean. There's this whole idea of the West is a very modern concept that's been pushed by cold warriors like Samuel Huntington for the agenda of getting people to support NATO against the Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union was in the East. So they wanted people to think of the West as exceptional so they can hate the East. Because the East, in this case, is the evil Russians and the Soviet Union. Oh, the West. This is something that was being pushed heavily during the Cold War. It was being pushed heavily in the early 2000s or in the 2010s. And it was being pushed by the Western conservative movement to push this whole idea of Western exceptionalism against Russia, against the Middle East, against countries that we don't like. Alexander loved Persian culture. Yeah, he did. He adopted Persian despotism as well. And Christianity doesn't come from the West, by the way. It comes from the East. And I really don't like, and tell me if you guys think I'm wrong. If you think I'm wrong, please explain to me why you think I'm wrong. But I really don't like this obsession that a lot of people in the Western world have for Athenian philosophy, and I really hate it. I don't hate it, but it kind of irks me when people say things like, well, Western civilization came from the marriage between Athens and Jerusalem. I've heard that so many times, and that was something that was really being pushed, I remember, in the early 2010s by people. Oh, it goes back to Athens and Jerusalem, and Christianity and Athens, and putting Christianity and Greek philosophy together, we get Western civilization. Well, maybe that's true, right? Well, it is true, right? Because Thomas Aquinas was hardcore into Greek philosophy. But is that something really helpful for society, right? Was it really helpful for Thomas Aquinas to merge Christianity with Greek philosophy? And I don't believe that it was helpful. I think it was actually demonic. I think it was actually dangerous, because what it did was it opened the door, and you can see this in Thomistic philosophy. What it did was it opened the door for people to say, well, I mean, the Greeks adopted homosexuality, and so homosexuality can be natural. And so because the Greeks gave us one half of our civility, so to speak, then that means we should also embrace the sodomist side of Greek society. And Thomas Aquinas got a lot of stuff from Aristotle and from Socrates. And if you read Socrates, homosexuality is explicitly expressed by Socrates. And so why are we merging sodomitic authors? Why are we associating sodomist authors with the Christian faith? I can be a Christian and never read Greek philosophy. I've never read I've never read all of the Socratic dialogues. I've read some of them, but I've never read all of them. I've never sat there and read Plato's Republic. I've read little parts here and there, but I've never read Plato's Republic from beginning to end. Does that make me less of a Christian? I've never sat down and read all of the Summa Theologica. I've read parts of the Summa Theologica. I've especially read the political parts of the Summa Theologica, but I have never read the entirety of the Summa Theologica. Does that make me less of a Christian? And no Catholic is going to sit there and say, oh, yeah, that makes you less of a Christian. No one's going to say that. Why? Because they know that all of this pushing for Greek philosophy and all this push for merging Christianity with Greek philosophy is completely unnecessary. We don't need Greek philosophy. We don't need any of that stuff. We had the Christian faith. We have the Christian faith. We don't need Greek philosophy. We don't need any of that stuff. Jesus didn't quote Greek philosophy. Paul quoted a Greek philosopher somewhat when he was preaching to the Athenians, but he quoted that philosopher not to praise Greek philosophy and not to merge Greek philosophy with Christianity. He quoted that Greek philosopher partially to bash paganism, because there was a Greek philosopher who said, in Zeus and with Zeus do we walk. And Paul was preaching to the Athenians, and Paul says, in Christ and with Christ we walk. And I've heard these Catholic scholars and these Protestant scholars welcome, they'll welcome Greek philosophy, and they'll quote this line and say, you see, Paul was quoting Greek philosophy. And so therefore this whole Thomistic method of merging Christian religion with Greek philosophy is absolutely correct, and it's essential. But that's not what Paul was doing. And to make that argument is really bad faith, because what Paul was saying was that philosopher was full of shit. What Paul was effectively saying was, to hell with Zeus. It's not in Zeus. He was in fact bashing what that philosopher wrote, because that philosopher insisted that, we live in Zeus, we walk with Zeus. And Paul is saying, no, we walk with Christ. So how could you use this verse as an argument for merging together Greek philosophy with Christianity? It's bullshit. I remember growing up in the 2010s, and I remember going to Barnes and Noble and going online and watching YouTube lectures and things like that. And I remember I would pick up these books about Christianity and Western civilization and things like that, and I would read them. And I would get all excited. Oh, look, this author from this prestigious university is writing some very nice things about Christianity. And you would look at these books, or you would look at these YouTube videos on the subject of Christian civilization. And all these books and all these videos would do the same thing. They would all say Christian civilization came from the merging of Greek philosophy with Christianity, and it's just amazing, and it's wonderful, and it's essential to our Christian society that we have Greek philosophy and all these things. And looking back, I have to say that all of this talk, all of this rhetoric, all of this propaganda is merely NATO ideology. It's just NATO ideology. It's all it is. It's a way to get us to believe in Western exceptionalism. And if we can believe in Western exceptionalism, then that means we should love NATO, because NATO is the West. And we should hate the East, or look down on the East and see the East as barbaric and primitive. Because, those Slavs over there, they're Putlerist, and those Middle Eastern people out there, they're murderers and they're terrorists. And I remember not many years ago, but about, it was back in 2018, so years and years ago, I remember going to Italy. And I remember before I went to Italy, I would hear all the time about how, Italy is it's being taken over by refugees and migrants, and they're destroying Italy and this and that. And I'll be honest with you, when I was in Italy, I didn't see a whole lot of Muslims when I was there. I really didn't. I rarely ever saw Muslims there. Now, I did see one Muslim dude who looked like he could have been a member of ISIS, and he did look legitimately scary. And honestly, he should have been arrested and seriously investigated and probably deported or put in prison, because he was, just by looking at him, he was definitely a threat to society. But other than that guy, I didn't really see people who were criminals walking around, prowling the streets. I just never saw that. And I remember I went to Rome, I went to a number of big cities in Italy, and I rarely ever saw Muslims. And when I did, with the exception of that one guy, I never saw Muslims acting problematically. I saw a bunch of Middle Eastern people when I was in Rome. In fact, there's a whole street in Rome that is just filled with Middle Eastern people. And I walked through that whole street. I had a kebab sandwich. No one messed with me. Never got robbed. Nothing happened. Just a bunch of working class people walking around. And I remember I went to this one part of Italy. It was in northern Italy. Oh, I don't remember the name of it. It was It was a city near Bologna, like that Bologna area. And I remember seeing this Italian guy riding his bicycle, and I kid you not, his front wheel hit something, and I watched as his front wheel hit something. I don't know what it was, but it hit something that made the back wheel go up, and the whole bike flipped on the seat part. And the guy was smack on the ground, and you can tell he was injured. And I should have ran over there and helped him. I should have. Until this day, I feel bad that I didn't run over there and help him. But think of this. Italian guy. White Italian, not immigrant, white guy. Italian. You know, buongiorno, spaghetti, all this stuff. Lasagna, pizza, lasagna, that type. Real Italian. The bicycle is riding. The front wheel hits something. The back wheel goes up, and it lands, the back wheel, the whole bike lands on the seat part. This dude is smack on the ground. He's injured. He's not getting up. He's laying on the ground. I should have ran over there and helped him. But I remember telling my dad, I said, Dad, we were in a very crowded street. There were a lot of people around. A lot of people. And I think it may have been raining. I don't remember. But there were a lot of people around. And I remember telling my dad, I said, Dad, let's wait and see if any Italians help him. So we did a little sociological observation. And we watched as this guy was on the floor. And we waited to see if anyone would help him. And I watched as Italian people, I kid you not, I saw this with my own eyes. I watched as Italian people walked right past this dude and didn't do shit. Didn't do nothing. Not even, hey, are you okay? Get up. Oh, let's help this guy up. Nothing. Do you need an ambulance? Nothing. People walked past this dude's body. And we're like, fuck him. We don't care. This kid, they didn't even look down. So I told my dad, I said, let's just wait and see who helps him. Because we waited. And we waited. And we waited. People will just walk past this guy. Dude didn't do shit. And then I saw, with my own eyes, two, they were either Pakistani or Indian. I can't tell the difference. But they were, let's just say they were from the Indian subcontinent. So let's just say they were Indian or Paki Indians. Let's just say that. I saw some Paki Indians, two of them. They were the only ones who helped this dude up. I kid you not. This Italian dude smack on the floor. He's just smacked there. The whole bike flipped. He's in pain. People walking past him, not doing shit. Two Indian dudes or Pakistanis, Paki Indians. They walk up to this dude. They both help him up. And they talk to him. And I think he walked holding his bicycle somewhere else. But the only people who helped this dude were foreigners. And, you know, people will sit there and talk about, oh, the refugees and the immigrants. Yeah, there's bad refugees. There's bad immigrants. Not denying that. Absolutely. But there are good people who are immigrants. And that goes without saying. It goes without saying. And this whole anti-immigrant, anti-refugee stuff, it's eventually going to lead to a lot of problems. You know, it's going to lead to a lot of problems. It's going to lead to massive violence. We already got a sample of that in the summer of last year when people were destroying businesses because the business owners were foreigners. That happened in Northern Ireland. We saw a little bit of that in England. Not a little, but we saw a lot of that in England as well. I mean, it's gonna be bad, you know. And I remember thinking I would love to live in Ireland because I love Irish music. But I'm pretty certain if I were to move to Ireland, I wouldn't like it because I'm sure Ireland has changed a lot since the 1990s. And all the Irish music that I enjoyed listening to was from the 1990s. Yeah, I'm pretty certain if I moved to Ireland, there would be an outbreak of anti-refugee hunting groups just prowling the streets. And I would have to get the hell out of there.